Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here. It's pretty exciting to be at our sixth, that's kind of hard to believe, sixth annual SU Research Day. This is where we come together and highlight some of our outstanding faculty and their scholarly activities. So it's meant to be celebratory in nature and also meant to be academic in nature. And so we appreciate all of you being here, students, staff, faculty, everyone. It's a great time to kind of celebrate what we do outside of the classroom as well as the activities that we do that support our faculty and staff and their scholarly activities. For those of you that don't know the voice or the face, I'm Clifton Griffin, Dean of Grad Studies and Research here at SU. Lots of folks in our office have been a part of the logistics of setting this up, so I'm very appreciative of the staff of Grad Studies and Research for all of their activities today and the last few days to get us started. I do want to say thank you to our president, Dr. Chuck White, for making it. I know he's rushed here from a Board of Regents, a thrilling Board of Regents experience, and so we appreciate you being here, Chuck. Thank you very much. Also want to say a big shout out and thanks and appreciation for our interim provost and senior vice president, Dr. Karen Olmstead, huge advocate and supporter of research at all levels from faculty to grad students to undergraduates. So thank you all for being here for sure. So to keep us on time, I'm going to hush, which is the hardest thing I ever do, and we'll get started with our first presentation. From the Department of Music, Theater, and Dance, we have Dr. Louise Anderson, and from the Department of Education, Leadership, and Graduate Studies, we have Dr. Diana Wagner, who are going to share with us, I won't say just talk to us, because they're going to do more than talk, for sure, about Peter Dale Wimbrough. All right. Peter Dale Wimbrough, Delmarva's songster.
Thank you, everyone. And we are going to start our presentation right now.
There's a man in our town who plays a ukulele. He never lays it down, and folks keep hanging round.
Sit every night and plays upon it daily. He keeps folks up so late, just works to get them make a date.
When old Pete Daly plays his ukulele down in Whaleyville,
the man can't make the men stand still.
he makes the flea flies ever through.
Mails out your kangaroo
When old Pete Daly plays his ukulele in Whaleyville.
So our journey into the life of Peter Dale Wimbrough Sr. started with that song, and that's another anecdote we can talk about later. But his journey is a very, very interesting one, and we would like to preserve his life story. His journey includes military service in World War I, in which he saw frontline battle in the Meuse-Argonne offensive in France. And it also includes him being a musician. He was a songwriter, he was a performer, he also designed his own instrument. As far as radio is concerned, with radio programming, he had a national audience. We believe, we're checking into this, we've been told that he had an hour-long program with Arthur Godfrey. We know of many other instances with his radio programming. So he had a national audience. He was a comedian, which is evident in some of his songs. And he was also known as a really great storyteller. He also experienced an injury as a result of World War I, we'll explain that a little later, that nearly cost his life at least twice.
And Dale's journey, musical journey, really placed some deep roots on Delmarva, but his journey actually goes all the way to Sebastian, Florida. In our research, we've seen that he and his beloved wife, Dottie, were exceptionally social justice oriented and civically engaged, I say from my PACE friends back there, and that when they moved to Sebastian, Florida, they immediately became involved in the community, so much so that if you go to Sebastian today, you can play with your children in Dale Wimbrough Park, you can drive there on Wimbrough Drive, and you can even launch your boat at Wimbrough Boat Ramp.
It is the musician in Dale Wimbrow that we would like to highlight today for the purpose of this presentation. As a musician, skipped twice. As a musician, 1925 to 1930 is the high point of what we see as his performing and musical life. He was a performing artist with a band called the Original Indiana Five, and they were prolific performers from 1920 to 1929. As a performer with solo performing, he was a singer, and he also was a ukulele player. The 1920s, of course, were one of the heydays for ukulele performance. We also have a recording that we've heard, and he's been referenced to as being this amazing whistler. We've tried to imitate that, but yeah, we're not there yet. And with his radio shows, it's been very interesting research to take a look at the radio magazines of the day. You know, we have TV guides. Well, there were radio guides. And he had radio programming that was a regular weekly event in prime time on radio. He had his own shows. He would co-host with shows. One such show were the Jazz Judges. Jazz, of course, was also a style of music increasing at that time as well. His composing is prolific, and when you start getting into looking at history of copyright and who owns what, it can be a little confusing. Plus, these people, the artists at this time, would often change their names or use different names in different situations. So at this point, we have 24 songs that we feel very confident have correct attributions to Dale Wimbrow, but we believe there's many more than that. And his songs, interesting to me as a music theory, is that there's not really a formula per se to how he creates his songs. Most of them did include an interlude, an instrumental interlude. Chord progressions I find interesting for this time. And he also was able to write the comedic songs like, you know, Pete Daly played his ukulele in Whaleyville. But he also had some very heartwarming, tender songs and songs that reflect very much pop culture of the day.
So as we've explored his discography, we actually made a big chronological chart so that we could really see where his creative bursts happen, so to speak. And there's a very defined musical creative burst from 1925 to 1930. This was also our first inkling that he had a social justice streak in him. Now it's the 20s on the segregated Eastern Shore in Whaleyville, which is about 20 minutes east of here. And he records a tune with his band, the Rubeville Tuners. Now, there was a movie in 1918 around there called the Grand Opera in Rubeville. But the word rube actually means basically a clueless country bumpkin.
The trumpet player that he played with a lot describes the Rubeville Tuners as a bunch of cornball musicians.
Right. And so, but he wrote a tune called Country Bred and Chicken Fed. And I will say, before I perform my best chicken impression ever, that we are learning these songs as closely to the way he recorded them as possible. So we're not embellishing them with extra special effects or anything. And so this is Country Bred and Chicken Fed. It is an homage to the strong, hardy Eastern Shore woman, and it is most definitely a warning to the men to take them quite seriously.
Country bred and chicken fed, who said country girls are dead? Listen, boys, I got my eyes a-blinking. If you think they ain't wise, start in telling them some lies. They'll open up your eyes, I am thinking.
'Cause they get out instead of in their beds at early dawn. That's the way they never miss a thing that's going on. Country bred and chicken fed, like Patrick Henry said, you be them country girl of mine.
Country bred and chicken fed, mark them shoes beneath my bed. Anytime I find one who will marry. If you think they are dumb, go pick up another one, 'cause you were wrong and so's your Uncle Harry. right, on this slide, we've highlighted 3 different tunes. The first one highlighted is Think of Me Thinking of You, and it says it was written for Johnny Marvin. Johnny Marvin is a really big name as a ukulele player during this time, and that tune was actually recently covered by the jazz great Leon Redbone in 1985. You'll see that tune coming up on the next slide. The Piccadilly Players recorded that piece. They did their own version that was very much like Charleston-like music and very Charleston dance music and very upbeat. But we really prefer the original version of the tune by Johnny Marvin. The next 2 tunes that are highlighted, the Country Fair in Delaware and the Good Old Eastern Shore, are the 2 songs that Dale Wimbrow is most famous for and well known for here on the Eastern Shore and beyond. The family of Peter Dale Wimbrow considers the Good Old Eastern Shore to be one of the family song. It was extremely popular. And on the next slide, I have some of the lyrics of this tune, just the first part of it. And I've highlighted the word Delmarva. We have a little more research to do to verify this, but according to a descendant of Peter Dale Wimbrow, Dale Wimbrow is considered to be the person who coined this term. And in this song, he mentions Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia. He also, not in the clip you're going to hear right now, but a little bit later in the song, he has musical quotes from the Maryland, Delaware, and Virginia state songs. So here's just a little clip of this. This is actually Peter Dale Wimbrow singing The Good Old Eastern Shore.
There's a land and it ain't California, where I park myself no more to roam. The people down there call it now Delmarva. Still to me it's just my home sweet home. So take me to the shores of old Virginia, or Delaware, or sunny Maryland. And when you get me there, just leave me anywhere, because I know I'll find the welcome hand.
I'd like to point out at the bottom of the screen with the lyrics, what you're seeing on the picture on the right-hand side as well is the picture of the sheet music, the actual cover of the sheet music. And those lovely faces are faces of women in the shape of these peaches, which Delmarva was very well known for growing fruit. So in the lyrics towards the bottom of the screen, it says, they've got the sweetest peaches there that ever could be found. They fall right off the tree and then get up and walk around. Referring to, I guess, the women on the Eastern Shore.
So as we look at his later discography in the late 20s, he's writing for some heavy hitters. Rudy Valley, Vernon Dalhart, big deal in the 20s, Gene Austin, and one of his biggest hits, which was recorded originally by Duke Ellington, and Duke released it multiple times before it really became a bit of a jazz standard, was Accordion Joe. We put a photo there of Duke Ellington's accordion soloist, Joe Cornell Smelser. What's also important about Dale Wimbrow, aside from his absolute importance to Delmarva history and culture, is that his songwriting captures popular culture in the 1920s. So we see a song called Plucky Lindy's Lucky Day. Any guesses who that's about? Charles Lindbergh, who had lots of nicknames, and one of them was Plucky Lindy. I think that's one of the recordings we haven't located quite yet.
Oh, so, I have it.
Oh, of course you do.
I just found it.
I was going to say their homework is to go home, and if you have any 78s, please look through them.
And just to go along with that, I found an article just specifically about songs about Charles Lindbergh, and there were so many that were written during that time about him.
And so Dale Wimbrow was not only a chronicler of history and culture and a prolific songwriter, but he was also an instrument builder. So when Dale was playing with the Rubeville Tuners, they were a quartet, and he had this wimpy little ukulele to play. A soprano ukulele is sort of like my 6-pound chihuahua. It looks tougher than it is. And so he thought, geez, this is not going to stand up against brass instruments or a bass or a piano. And so he set out to invent a more acoustically sound instrument, and he did, called the wimbrola. It is fascinating. It's sort of a pineapple-shaped body. The body is made of 9 sides by softening and bending the wood. Those aren't individual
You're right,
pieces.
it's one piece of wood to bend.
Yeah, one piece of wood. And so if you picture the sound wave as a pinball, that sound is bouncing around at all kinds of angles in there, and so it really amplifies it. The other thing that he did is that he doubled the C and the E strings. And string doubling basically adds 2 voices on the same pitch. It's like if I sing a solo or we sing a duet, it doubles the acoustic power of that note that we're singing. And so it's a technique that we see in mandolins, certainly 12-string guitars get their big voices because all of the string courses are doubled. And so he really was an innovator in figuring out, this is way before Les Paul figured out how to plug a guitar into an amp. How do you make a bigger voice to stand up to recording of the 20s when the band would stand around a single bluegrass mic, essentially?
One of his trumpet players left a wonderful written account of recording some of these songs, and the players would be standing on platforms at different levels, and they each had a cone that they would be playing into. So the other property about this ukulele that's interesting is if you look at the strings and you go to the right side of the instrument where the bridge is, those strings are equidistant apart. Normally on an instrument where there are double strings, the double strings stay close together all the way to the bridge. But in this case, the strings become equidistant, meaning that each string now is going to sound very clearly. So that adds to the acoustic property of the instrument as well. Last thing on this slide is this is a special custom-made instrument, the Favila Company, which this has taken us in so many wonderful directions, but they made the instruments for Dale Wimbrow and to sell publicly, and this was a special custom one made specifically for him.
And on the first wimbrola that was made, inside here we see the label. Who else would he dedicate it to but his beloved Dottie? And so that label dedicates to the very first wimbrola to the love of his life.
Yes, we've tracked this wimbrola down, and we've communicated with the gentleman in the Midwest who owns it, so it's on our list, right, to go see it. Now we get to, unfortunately, radio silence. During World War I, in this offensive campaign in France, he was exposed to severe mustard gas, just a huge amount of mustard gas. He was brought home, and they really thought he was not going to live. He did survive the gassing, but when he was working in radio in Chicago and in New York, 2 different times, he experienced vocal hemorrhaging. It's just absolutely terrible. And they really thought he was not going to survive the second vocal hemorrhage. So doctors told him that he would have to leave radio if he really wanted to live, because he needed to preserve his voice. So he leaves New York City, and he comes back to Whaleyville, actually, and then he does a little bit more, and the doctor said, look, you need to go to a warmer climate that would be better for you health-wise. His wife, Dottie, also had some health issues, and Florida would be good for her as well. So they moved the family to Sebastian, Florida. Now, once they moved down there, he's such a radio guy, he goes to WIOD in Miami, and he tries to do a little bit of radio there, but again, vocal cord hemorrhage. So that really ends his career. And according to his descendant, by the time Dale Wimbrow passes away, he really has very little voice. It's just kind of a croaking sound. Very sad. But from the time he moved to Sebastian, Florida, to the time he passes away, he and his wife really did the wonderful job of building up Sebastian, Florida. They begin a subscription newspaper in 1948. It's called the Indian River News. It won a lot of awards. You could get this all over the United States because it was by subscription. He wins awards for editing, for editorials that he has written. His wife, Dottie, just becomes this fabulous real estate person down there and builds up a real estate empire in the area. And that's why we see a lot of reference to Wimbrows. Their civic service during this time was also incredible, working during World War II before they moved down there, and then continuing with the Red Cross and all kinds of many civic engagements. 1936, I saw in a Billboard magazine in 1936, they asked the question, where are the great radio personalities such as Dale Wimbrow? He kind of dropped off the face of radio at that time. And it just kind of shows that he really was an important person in the radio industry. His wife, excuse me, let me switch it around. He passes away in 1954, and his wife continues the newspaper, I think until the 70s, 80s, yes.
Now, in addition to his songwriting, this is a whole nother conference, are his other writings. He wrote books, he wrote narratives, he wrote poems. One of his famous poems is a poem called The Guy in the Glass, which he wrote in response to a contest. The American Mercury magazine got a letter from a young fellow fretting about how he would make his fortune in the world, and so the magazine said, okay, writers, give us your best shot. And Dale sent in this poem. It has been misattributed to lots of people over the years. In fact, Ann Landers misattributed it in the 80s, and Dale's Dale Jr. wrote a letter to her setting the record straight, and her apology is profuse. The first line, when you get what you want in your struggle for pelf, you'll often see that changed to self because nobody knows the word pelf and they think it's a typo, but pelf is just an old word for money. One of the unsubstantiated theories, we just haven't been able to substantiate it, is that this poem was the inspiration for Michael Jackson's Man in the Mirror. And if you look at both texts side by side, the thematic resemblances are actually pretty striking.
The most recent quote of this poem that I've been able to find is 2017, a leadership book came out for business leadership, and this was directly right in that book and used as a part of ethics for business leadership. So where do we go from here? These are things that we would like to accomplish through this research. We would like to add to the archives of the NAB Center to preserve especially the Delmarva history that is evident through his life and through his music. We would also love to be able to put together a museum exhibit. We have connected with people who own the memorabilia directly related to Dale Wimbrow. There's a gentleman in Berlin especially who has quite a bit of his materials as well. In Maryland curriculum, it is the 4th grade in which students are given a lot of information about, and they study Maryland history. So how about developing some materials for the music educators so that they can add Dale Wimbrow and some of his tunes or activities into their curriculum? And because we've uncovered so many layers here, and it's just takes us down so many interesting paths, we would love to put together a biography to preserve all the different facets that we've seen so far. It is a very interesting life and interesting on so many levels.
And it is a very heartfelt life. The definite takeaway so far from his biography is his devotion to Dottie. And so we go back now to Think of Me, Thinking of You. Dale was the lyricist on this. The music was co-written by Johnny Marvin and Charlie Abbott, two heavy hitters in the 1920s jazz scene. And we end with this song because when Dottie passed in the 80s, this is the song that she asked to be sung at her, Dottie's daughter asked that this song be sung at her funeral, and just as Dale would have done, we will make Dottie our last thought.
Peter Dale and Dottie and their daughter Sally Dale are interred in the Dale Cemetery in Whaleyville.
On the top of the hill in the middle.
When your day has passed away and skies are gray, sweetheart, think of me, thinking of you. Remember too that only you can keep us us two apart. Think of me, thinking of you. Think of me, thinking of you.
Earlier during your presentation, you mentioned that Mr. Dale, he fought for social justice. What issues did he address?
Well, one of the best stories, and just yesterday I was in the parking lot talking to Clara Small, Professor Emeritus of History. In Whaleyville, there used to be the African United Methodist Episcopal Church. Attached to that church was the Negro Boys School, because remember, the Eastern Shore was segregated. The school was in horrible disrepair, and so Dale and the church, I think he approached the church leaders about doing a fundraiser to fix the school for the young men who went to school there. So they planned a concert. We've seen concert advertisements for it. Mm-hmm. He gave a concert. People paid to get in. The concert was over, and one of the men from the church, as people were leaving, yelled up to him and said, Mr. Dale, there's still people out here who couldn't get in. What do you want to do? He said, take their money. We'll do it again. He did the entire concert 2 more times during that night, and in one night, they raised enough money to rebuild the school.
And paint the entire church. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of our faculty presenters. We certainly appreciate your energy. This brings us to the end of our faculty presentation part of the SU Research Day. We encourage you to stick around, have some refreshments, and visit with the folks that are in the back. Once again, thank you to all of our faculty. Let's give them another round of applause. Fascinating array of scholarship that we heard about this afternoon, and it always is really a great opportunity to hear from our faculty. Thank you so much.